just past midnight in Moscow, Idaho, a peaceful college town where students laugh, party, and dream about the future. No one knew that within a few hours, this same town would wake up to one of the darkest nights in American history. November 13th, 2022. Inside a three-story off-campus home on King Road, 5 students were sleeping, but by sunrise, only one of them would walk out alive. 4 young souls, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally murdered in their own beds. No robbery, no sign of forced entry, just pure horror. The question that soon followed, who could have done something like this, would lead to a man whose job was to study murderers. Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old PhD student at Washington State University, soft-spoken, intelligent, focused, and obsessed with understanding criminal minds. He wasn't just studying criminology, he lived and breathed it. He wrote research papers about how killers choose their victims. He even tried to survey criminals online, asking, "How did you feel before you committed your crime? What drove you to do it?" At first glance, he was just a student fascinated by psychology. But as detectives later realized, his fascination might have turned into something far darker. 3:28 a.m., November 13th. A white Hyundai Elantra is seen on surveillance cameras driving repeatedly through the King Road neighborhood. It passes the same street 4 times. At 4:04 a.m., the car returns again, its headlights off. Moments later, faint sounds of movement and a muffled scream are heard inside the house. By 4:20 a.m., the same car speeds away into the darkness. Inside, 4 students lay dead. 2 others, miraculously, survived. When police arrived that morning, what they saw was chaos. Blood on the walls, beds overturned, phones scattered, and near one of the bodies, a small brown leather sheath. On it, a single trace of male DNA. That single clue would change everything. Detectives had no suspect, no motive, and no weapon. But they had one lead: that car. They searched DMV databases, surveillance footage, and traffic cameras across Idaho and Washington. Days turned into weeks. Then a breakthrough. Washington State University campus police found security footage of a white Hyundai Elantra registered to Bryan Kohberger. Detectives started digging into his background. No criminal record, no violence. Just a quiet criminology student who lived 10 miles from the murder scene. But then came the DNA match. Investigators secretly collected trash from Kohberger's parents' home in Pennsylvania. When tested, the DNA from that trash matched the sample found on the knife sheath. The odds? More than 99.9%. It was enough. On December 30th, 2022, SWAT teams broke into his family's home and arrested him in the middle of the night. The criminology student had just become the headline of the very crimes he once analyzed. When the news broke, people couldn't believe it. A criminology PhD student accused of a quadruple murder? Friends and professors were stunned. Some said Bryan was awkward, but harmless. Others remembered the way he stared at people, almost as if he was studying them. But the public wanted answers. Why those 4 students? What was the connection? What was his motive? Investigators dug through his phone records, laptop data, and social media. No direct link was ever found between Kohberger and the victims. No texts, no messages, no photos, nothing. As detectives followed the digital breadcrumbs, more unsettling patterns appeared. Kohberger's cell phone had pinged near the King Road house at least 12 times before the murders. Always late at night, always in the same area. Was he stalking the house or studying it as part of his obsession with crime scenes? No one knows. Even today, police say, we still can't confirm his reason for being there. Then there was his search history. Terms related to tracking cell towers, DNA analysis, and how to leave no trace. He'd even turned off his phone for a 2-hour window during the murders, the only time it went dark for weeks. Every move looked calculated, every step rehearsed. It was as if the killer wanted to prove he could outsmart everyone. In July 2025, after nearly 2 years of hearings, Bryan Kohberger stunned the court by pleading guilty to all charges, 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 of burglary. The judge sentenced him to 4 life sentences without parole. But even in that moment, he never explained why. No apology, no tears, just silence. His lawyers revealed later that Bryan had been diagnosed with autism, OCD, ADHD, and a restrictive eating disorder called ARFID. But psychologists say none of that justifies cold-blooded murder. And that brings us to the haunting truth. We still don't know the why. Even with the case closed, some questions remain frozen in time. Why those victims? Out of hundreds of students in Moscow, why that one house? Was it personal or purely random? What was the motive? Power? Control? A twisted experiment? Or was it something darker? Sexual, psychological, or even academic? Who was the intended target? Some believe Kaylee or Madison were the main targets. Others think Bryan simply wanted to kill anyone. Where is the murder weapon? The knife sheath was found. The knife itself? Never recovered. Why didn't he fight the case? He spent months saying he was innocent, then suddenly pled guilty. Did he do it to protect someone? Or was he tired of pretending? Why the silence? At sentencing, when given a chance to speak, he refused, not a single word. Some investigators think Kohberger viewed the killings as a control fantasy, a way to feel dominant after years of isolation. Others think he wanted to create the perfect crime, a test of his own intelligence. He studied criminal profiling, DNA mistakes, and investigative psychology, and still left behind the one thing he couldn't control, a single trace of himself. It's chilling to think that maybe, deep down, he wanted to be caught, to be known, to be remembered, even for the worst thing imaginable. But beyond the theories and the courtroom drama were 4 young lives. Kaylee, Madison, Zana, and Ethan. Friends, siblings, dreamers. Their families still struggle with the question, why? No motive can ever bring them peace, and Bryan's silence only deepens their pain. For them, this isn't just a story of crime and punishment. It's a story of stolen futures and unanswered questions that will echo for years. Bryan Kohberger now spends every day in a small prison cell, under heavy watch. No more criminology classes, no more research, just silence. Maybe that's what he wanted, to keep the world guessing forever, to die with the secret that everyone's still trying to solve. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. What do you think happened that night? Was it a calculated experiment by a genius gone mad, or something even darker? Let me know your theory in the comments. Sometimes the ones who study darkness become it. Before we begin, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. By the mid-1950s, Edward Gein's obsessions had escalated into a horrifying reality. What had begun as grave robbing now crossed into murder. And the victims were not just statistics, they were real women with families, with lives, whose stories would be forever intertwined with Gein's dark legacy. This is the story of Mary Hogan, Bernice Worden, and the twisted path that led Edward Gein to become the Plainfield Butcher. Who was Mary Hogan, and why did she disappear so mysteriously in 1954? Mary Hogan, the first known victim of Edward Gein, was a bar owner in Plainfield, a woman in her 40s, independent and known in town for her warm but no-nonsense personality. In 1954, Mary disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Her death was initially unexplained, and the local community believed she had simply moved or vanished. It wasn't until years later, after Gein's arrest, that the horrifying truth came to light. Gein confessed to killing Mary Hogan, revealing the dark rituals and motives behind his acts. Mary's murder was not spontaneous. Gein had been obsessed with death and control, particularly over women. Her body was mutilated post-mortem, and items were taken from her remains to satisfy Gein's compulsions, items that would eventually reveal the depth of his depravity. What did police find inside Gein's house that changed everything? Gein's approach to murder was methodical yet warped. He was not a man who killed in public rage. His killings were private, intimate, and ritualistic. With Mary Hogan, he employed techniques that mirrored his fascination with human anatomy and artifacts. Body parts were carefully removed, preserved, and sometimes transformed into macabre objects, like masks or keepsakes. This signature would later become infamous in criminal psychology, illustrating how Gein's mental state translated fantasy into physical action. Who was Bernice Worden, and what happened that cold November morning in 1957? 3 years after Mary Hogan, Edward Gein would strike again. Bernice Worden, a 58-year-old hardware store owner, disappeared on the morning of November 16, 1957. That morning, Worden's truck was seen leaving the store. Few customers visited that day. Locals assumed the quiet streets were due to hunting season. By 5 p.m., Worden's son, Frank, arrived at the store and found the cash register open and bloodstains on the floor. What Frank would discover would shock the nation. Gein had captured Worden, shot her with a .22 caliber rifle, and brought her body back to his farm. But what followed was something that would be studied in criminal psychology and forensic science for decades. What horrors were discovered inside Gein's shed? Bernice Worden's body was discovered in a shed on the Gein property. Hanging upside down, tied at the ankles to a crossbar, her torso arranged in a manner described as like a deer. But the horror did not stop there. Gein removed various body parts with precision, driven by obsession, ritual, and psychosis. He stored the head in a burlap bag, preserved the heart in a plastic bag in front of the stove, and collected skin, bones, and organs for his macabre projects. Items recovered included skulls mounted on bedposts, female skulls and bowls made from crania, a corset made from a woman's torso, leggings fashioned from human leg skin, masks from female facial skin, Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag, Bernice Worden's complete head and heart, a belt made from human nipples, multiple noses and a pair of lips, a lampshade made from human skin. Every item, a testament to Gein's distorted reality. Every artifact, a chilling narrative of obsession and control. How did investigators uncover the House of Horrors? When Frank Worden alerted authorities, the investigation began in full force. Sheriff's deputies were initially unprepared for what they would find. Upon searching the Gein farm, the police were met with sights that defied imagination. Every room revealed objects crafted from human remains. Furniture, household items, even tools, each embedded with human tissue, testified to Gein's years of secret activities. Detectives took meticulous notes. They photographed every item. They collected evidence for forensic analysis. Each item had to be handled carefully, not only for legal reasons, but because of the psychological impact on the officers. Many officers reportedly suffered trauma simply witnessing the scene. The horror of what Gein had done lingered long after the initial discovery. Who were the real victims behind Gein's madness? To understand the full scope of Gein's crimes, we must remember the women he took from the world. Mary Hogan, bar owner, 40s, known for her independent spirit, murdered in 1954. Body mutilated, items preserved as keepsakes. Bernice Worden, hardware store owner, 58, respected member of the community, murdered in 1957. Body dismembered, stored, and used for ritualistic crafting of objects. While only these 2 murders are confirmed, Gein confessed to grave robbing, mutilation, and theft of corpses dating back several years. The forensic evidence suggested a pattern, a ritual, and a compulsion that extended far beyond these 2 victims. What did forensics reveal about the unimaginable truth? Forensic teams faced unique challenges. No crime scene had prepared them for furniture, lampshades, and clothing made from human skin. The bodies were decomposed, altered, and fragmented, complicating identification. Anthropologists were called in to determine age, sex, and cause of death of remains. Dental records and skeletal analysis helped match items to missing persons. The meticulous cataloging of evidence would later aid the prosecution and become a benchmark in forensic science courses. How did America react to the Plainfield Butcher? News of Gein's crimes shocked America. The media dubbed him the Plainfield Butcher. The horrifying details captured the public imagination. Newspapers printed sketches, crime scene photos, and interviews. Talk shows debated the psychology behind the crimes. Communities across the nation were gripped with fear. What could drive a man to such acts? And more importantly, could it happen anywhere, to anyone? Was Edward Gein truly insane, or just pure evil? In November 1957, Gein was formally charged with first-degree murder. He pled insanity, claiming he was incapable of controlling his actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed him with schizophrenia, confirming severe mental illness. He was initially found unfit to stand trial and was sent to the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. By 1968, doctors deemed him competent. During the trial, Gein claimed Bernice Worden's death was accidental. He could not recall the details clearly, an indication of dissociation and mental fragmentation. Ultimately, he was found guilty, but the psychiatric review declared him not guilty by reason of insanity. He spent the remainder of his life institutionalized, never free, but never executed. How did Edward Gein's crimes change horror forever? Edward Gein's crimes would inspire decades of horror media. His grotesque acts became the basis for films, novels, and urban legends. Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, all drew from the truth of Gein's horrors. They asked audiences to confront a reality where the line between sanity and madness, normalcy and horror, is terrifyingly thin. Gein's story is a stark reminder. Evil is not always loud, chaotic, or obvious. Sometimes it lurks in the quiet, the isolated, the ordinary. Hey, if you've watched the video till this point, first of all, thank you so much. It really means a lot. If you're enjoying the story, go ahead and drop a like right now and leave me a sweet comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing that. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps me keep bringing you more true crime stories just like this one.